Medfield TV. Community shows.
Hi, I'm Tom Robbins. I'm an engineer at a company called Lens Americas, and I've been there for 14 years working there, and I've also worked at other companies also in an engineering role, so you can say pretty much for my whole life career I've been an engineer, but I've also liked to write for quite a while since I was probably a teenager, and I continue to do that, and I enjoy it. And I have one son from my first marriage and two stepsons from my current marriage. And we live here in Medfield. I moved here 10 years ago and married my now wife. And we are very happy living in the community of Medfield. Many years ago, my dad used to write poems and short stories. I was probably maybe 15, 16 years old. I was probably like a senior in high school. He used to actually write poems when he was in the Navy, when he was away from home. He wrote a lot of poems to my mother and other family members because he just he missed them so much because he was in the Korean War for a long time. And he just one day picked up all of the stuff that he wrote and started writing a little more seriously. And he actually sent one of his stories to Stephen King. He was a big Stephen King fan back in the day, and he had quite a few letters back from Stephen King. But there was one time that he wrote a story that Stephen King actually liked a lot and said he should do something with it. And he never did. He was just too worried that it wouldn't be good enough, And back in those days, trying to get something published was a lot harder work. You had to write letters, you had to, submit to a magazine and wait. Everything was done by mail, so it's not like today, So anyway, seeing him doing all that kind of sparked an interest in me because I read a lot of his stuff and it was really good. He wrote mostly horror kind of stuff, because he was a big Stephen King fan. So I started with that. I decided I want to try to write a short story. And, I don't think it was anything as good as his, but, it kind of sparked an interest that, that's something that I wanted to do because I really did enjoy doing it too. He was pleased that I wanted to do that. And I started reading, more of Stephen King with him. And it was just sort of a bond that we never had before because, he and I didn't get along really great when I was in my early high school years. And it was just a way of kind of, smoothing things over. And we did a lot of that together, just writing stuff and just reading each other's work. It was just sort of a fun thing. I didn't really think of anything like writing a book or anything like that, but it was just fun sharing the story with him and then other people, in the family, friends that wanted to read it. And then of course I got into college and, I didn't have a whole lot of time to write anymore. So that kind of fell by the wayside. But, he was my primary reason why I started writing. As I said, I had a whole lot of short stories that I never really did anything with. And then over the years after I graduated college and, got a job and had a little bit more time to myself, because I wasn't in school anymore, I decided I wanted to, pick up some of that stuff and do something more with it. And at that point, I was really, really into science fiction by then. My dad used to work at a theater in Cambridge called the Orson Welles Cinema, and he kind of turned me on to a lot of the movies that he showed there because I went in there to work, help him out. and he was telling me about these festivals that they had every summer, that people would just literally go into the theater with blankets and pillows and just hang out, you know. And he wanted me to come in and you know, check it out with him. So I did, and I worked in the booth with him. He was the movie projectionist, by the way. So back in those days, they used to have these big film reels that were like this big, you know, around, and you had to put one on a machine and then another one next to it. And then when that roll ended, you had to start the second one so that there was no missed time in the movie. Probably old movies, you notice that these little marks in the corners, like at certain points, and that's what those were like telltales to start the other machine. So I did that, you know, with him. It was really cool. And then he said, well, now that you're all done here, why don't you go down and, you know, watch some of the movie? And I'm like, okay. So I went down, and it was like Woodstock, you know. You had just people laying there relaxing and stretched out, and you know, just all bundled up like kids with their parents, you know. It was just really, really nice. And everybody was happy, and it was so quiet, you know. So I just kind of plopped down in the middle of them and just started watching, you know, the movies. And it was like, you know, it was like watching a movie with like a whole room full of friends, you know, because they were just so happy and enjoying it. And I guess it was then that I really started enjoying science fiction, because that's all they showed. And it was really cool. So I got hooked, you know. I really liked science fiction at that point. So I decided to write about it. It started out as a short story. And in fact, later on, I ended up taking it to a step further and rewriting it. And then I submitted it to a company that was trying to do a contest for a short story. The guidelines were, first of all, it had to be 10,000 words or less, which, believe it or not, is hard for a writer, because you want to, you know, not just describe, you know, like what's happening in a scene, but you want to have good background to it so that you really pull the reader into the book. It's hard to do that with a short story. So I had to make the small amount of wording for description, for dialogue, for, you know, making the point as concise as possible, but still keep the, you know, the feeling and the depth of the story in there. It had to be a happy ending, and it had to show a positive way of, you know, proving that the human spirit and that humanity is worth being saved. So, you know, that was a kind of a hard thing, considering all the science fiction movies don't really do that much. So I put some twists into it and rewrote it, and took a couple of old stories and kind of merged them together and submitted it, and I won. I mean, I wasn't just the one person. There was like 12 other people that won. But it was across the country, and it was my first, like, wow, you know, I really did win something from this, you know? And they published it into a little anthology. It's called Science Fiction Anthology Volume 10. So obviously they've done this before. So it's a story about good and evil, taking one man from the Earth and another being from another planet, put them on yet a different planet, and they would battle each other, and the winner would receive all of the benefits from this superior race, because they wanted to see, you know, what made people be so desperate to make their planet be the best one. And but the key with this was, it wasn't done with, you know, fighting and guns, and it was a mind, like a psychic attack on each other. So it was really well received, and you know, it was a happy ending. So good one. As promised, Arthur Prindle sparkled into existence on a bizarre world very far from Earth. The Insarans made it painfully clear to him that what was required in order to be victorious. Such a victory would only be possible when he eliminated his opponent. Aside from his life, the reward would be enormous. Arthur recalled the telepathic message from the Insaran ghost. This place is a world of imagery, a place where the inhabitants are its creator. An invisible force of psychic energy is the influence which stimulates the mind into growth. The energy is manifested by a mix of the planet's atmospheric elements and other psychokinetic properties. Simply put, the air there makes you think better. Of course, the greater the mind's influence, the greater its adaptability to psychic energy. Arthur had it planted in his head. He was stronger than whoever he must shortly face. He had to be, or he would be returned to Earth, where he had to face the grill of a bus, his once interrupted death. It was just so cool to just see a book with your name on it and the book in print, like that short story was there. Gave it to a lot of friends and family, and just kind of, passed the word, through people that I worked with, through people that I had been in school with together, with high school and, college. And then I ended up wanting to take that and do something more with it. And that's what later turned into my novel. So it was really interesting. And that was the early part of my love to write. But it was during a time when I was also getting serious with a girlfriend, and I ended up marrying her, and then we got a house, and then we had a kid. And so all that stuff just kind of got pushed aside into a drawer, because there's just no time to do that, right? My son was probably like 2 or 3, and my dad was like dying from emphysema. He had a terminal illness that slowly, took his life, and he passed away. And it was that year that I kind of made a pact with myself that, I was going to put something more, something bigger, to help him, to help me, honor his memory, of being the one that got me interested in writing and in a lot of other things, because there's just so many things that you want to say to your dad, but you don't, He was that kind of guy, like, he loved us, and he was really warm and sensitive to my mother. But when it came to me and my brother, it was just me and my brother. He was sort of like, grow up and be your own man kind of thing. So emotion wasn't quite in the picture with us. But at the end, when I heard that he didn't have much, time left, it was just a remembrance of, the stuff that I didn't say to him. And so, I just told him right there before, it was too late, that I loved him and that I would always, honor and, be the kind of father that he was, to me and to the family. And I guess it was right around that time that I decided I wanted to do something more. And that's when I picked up that story that I wrote that was still sitting in that drawer, and I wanted to make something more out of it. So I decided to pursue writing a book. And that was challenging, because I was still, just a father for a couple of years. We had mortgage, we had, I had to work harder to get a better job to be able to support the family. So I went back to school. And then later on, I decided that I needed more help because the writing wasn't coming as easily as I wanted it to. So I took some writing classes, and the writing classes were down in Cambridge, Harvard. It was like an offshoot of Harvard, but they had some really, really good teachers that helped you with your raw work, that you were trying to do something with. And the kids the ladies and men that were in the class with me were equally, like trying to do something with their work. So one of the classes, we did a critique of each other's work. So I had like 6 people, critique the stuff that I had started. And they told me that they liked it. It was good, but it was too long and too complicated. And it turned out to be, like over 500 pages. So I could see their point, and I was always a little, skeptical about, criticism because, who likes having their work criticized, But it wasn't criticism, it was constructive feedback. And it was good feedback because I used that information and I decided to take my book and strip it out into sections. Instead of one big long book, it was going to be a short book and then 2 other books. And that's what happened. And I turned that one big book into 3 books, and I have a lot of work to do on the other 2, but the first one, I was able to finish. And that was just this past year I was able to publish it. My first published novel is called Guardians of Tomorrow. Book 1, The Rise of Veratta. Veratta is a planet that is divided into 2 factions. Originally, the planet was going through a period of medieval times and witchcraft and sorcery, and my book is centered on not just that period of their time, but also the futuristic society that grew from that. But there was a large group that chose to keep the old ways and still believe in, the old traditions. So the book really is about a battle between those 2 civilizations, one with magical powers and the other ones with, guns and lasers and, force fields. And it's a very important struggle because it also involves their future. The first book is going to be about how that struggle impacts their future, and the story itself centers at a critical point where that futuristic society is fighting amongst itself. So the people from the medieval time find this out and do their best to cripple their society because they don't believe in the antiseptic, sterile, do nothing physical to better yourself kind of society. They believe in, fighting and, surviving on your own and standing on your own 2 feet. And they're the ones that are dealing with the harsh climate outside of the protection of they have like a dome over their cities that protect them from, the sun and the ray, the freezing elements of the winter. And so these people outside are, resentful of what they've been missing, but also they're resentful of the fact that they've been cast out and left to die. And so the book is about those 2 powers, fighting to try and, one taking over the other. And there's 2 people in the book that are from the future of this planet that have come back from the past to try and make things right. And the whole book centers around, these 2 good and evil people. But the question is, which one is good and which one is evil? Because throughout the book, the one that you think is good suddenly does something that you don't think is so good. And somebody would say, oh my God, he's the evil one. But then later in the book, he does something good. And the one that's evil does something good. And then he does something evil. So I give it a lot of plot twists until the very end you finally figure out which one is good. But you have to read it to find that out. As Erson emerged from a jagged crevice, which came halfway down the mountain, he saw something glisten in the distance, an arch at the top of Carpetha. He didn't recall seeing it before until a familiar memory surfaced, a memory buried so deep he'd felt it had to have come from another time, long, long ago. The more searching he did, the quicker glimpses he saw of the arch as it was before him, and as it was back in another time, another place. It was the past he focused on. He remembered a mountain of crystal with giant statues holding swords downward into that beautiful white stone. One towered on either side of a massive opening in the mountain's face. Thousands of skulls lined the bottom where he stood. No, it wasn't me that did this. I am only a servant. Snapping from his reverie, he looked again at the arch high above, shining in the sunlight as the snow still lightly fell. His eyes squinted from the bright glare and the occasional flakes that landed on his face. And he climbed. He suddenly felt rejuvenated, perhaps because he knew the majesty this arch held. He climbed without stopping, his legs surging with power he'd forgotten. His gauntleted hands reached for stone lip after stone lip, never even looking below him. He scaled despite the harsh winds, despite the slippery ice between the rocks in his path. He reached the base of the arch, following its expanse upward along a row of jagged peaks, maneuvering around the countless rock formations, and glared up at its apex, until the blazing sun forced him to look away. He reminisced and looked up again. His face went somber, eyes lowered. This isn't it. Erison knew the arch would become important in due time. There's something else I must find, he said, looking up one last time. Something else. As I mentioned, the raw material of what was going to be the first book, was huge, and it's still huge, because the first book is done, and I still have probably about 200 or 300 pages left of the raw material. So a lot of that is going to be the second book, and it's still obviously the title of the series is still Guardians of Tomorrow. But book 2, the title, I can now tell you, is going to be called The Pawns of War. And we're going to find out, because the good and evil persons that are fighting at the very end of the first book are going to be going into the second book and become the primary focus of gathering up forces on each side to try and fight each other on a galactic scale instead of just the planet scale. The planet isn't good enough to conquer. Now they want to conquer the whole galaxy. Sounds a little bit Star Wars-ish, but the characters are very different. And so that's going to be book 2. I'm probably about halfway through the raw material, but it looks like where this book was 250 pages, the second book's going to be close to 500. And still the third book is going to be coming. I don't even know what that one's going to entail yet, because I'm still on book 2. So people that I work with have all bought my book and come up to me at lunchtime to sign it for them. So that's been pretty cool. So the age range at work has gone anywhere from early 20s to late 50s. Everybody has shown an interest and said that they loved it. So I'm very, very happy that I have my own little group at work that I can use as a target base, to see what they think. And I've also, heard from family and friends that all age span is like across the board. Cousins that have kids that are reading it, friends with kids that are reading it, uncles. My wife read the first raw one but refuses to read the new one because it gave her nightmares. My stepson is going to read it. My other stepson may read it if we can get a copy to him. And my son was at the book signing at the library a couple of weeks ago, so he has a copy, so I know he's going to read it and give it to his friends at work. So I'm hoping that it's going to be pretty much anyone in the late teens through all the way up to the 50s and 60s. So pretty much the whole spectrum. But so far, I would say the younger audience seems to enjoy it the most. I met with the director of the library because I came into the library and left a copy of my book with the girl that was at the desk that day. And she said that she would give it to the director, who wasn't there. But she got a copy of my book, and Bree reached out to me and sent me an email and said that she liked it and wanted to put the book into their library circulation. So she did that, and then she emailed me again and said, actually, I decided to put it into circulation for all the Minuteman libraries. So it's not just the Medfield library, it's anybody holding a Minuteman library card that can ask for it at their library. And it's so funny because my mother has a best friend that lives down in Florida that she went to the library because she buys books a lot. or takes them out a lot. And she asked, because they had a Minuteman Library card in Massachusetts, and she tried to use it, and of course, they don't have that down in Florida. But I just thought it was a funny story that she tried. I had the honor of being able to be at an event in Medfield that was doing a book sale. It was June 29th, and they let me set up right there in the front lobby of the library, so people passing by to buy books could see my exhibit. And the cover of my book was done by a young lady that does beautiful artwork, by the way. Her name is Avery Filoni, and you can see her stuff at Instagram. The picture on the book is fantastic, and the artwork is beautiful. So it was the first thing they saw, and it drew a little bit of a crowd for me. But family and friends were there to support me, and I didn't think that any of this would ever happen. I just thought I was going to publish the book, and that was going to be it. But this is pretty amazing, and it's all very very exciting, and it's a first for me. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for everybody that's reached out to me and has offered the chance to do this, including you guys, by the way. Thank you so much. This was published 6 years ago, but it can still be purchased online. It's available on Amazon, and it's called Cross Time Science Fiction Anthology Volume 10. And it can also be bought through Cross Time Publishing themselves. And this can be purchased at any Barnes and Nobles or similar bookstores. You just have to go into the library and ask for it. It's registered in the computers of most libraries in the New England area. And it can also be purchased directly from the publisher's website, which is xlibris.com. And you can also get these on Amazon as well. And I believe this is now even available in ebook form. So people have been buying that and downloading it onto their Kindles, and they can do it that way. So I hope you buy my book and enjoy it. I'm really happy that I was able to do all this. Of course, I'm sorry that my dad never got to see it. And he was a big inspiration for my writing. But I know, somehow up there he knows. But I also am really grateful because my son, Scott, is also very good at writing. So I'd like to think a little bit of that came from me. He's an engineer as well. He just graduated college a few years ago. But he has a passion for writing too. He wrote in his school newspaper in Ithaca called the Ithaca Tab. And he wrote some really good articles. And he definitely has the creativity and the ability to to bring the words to life, which is what I feel I was able to do because of my dad. So it's just a really great feeling that I now feel, because I know the joy of seeing your own kid grow up and be successful and follow kind of in your footsteps. So I'm really grateful for that. And my stepson, Joshua, also has been writing a book. So, I don't know, maybe the bug bit them all. But he's 20, and he just finished his first year in college. But he's writing a story. It's very different from this, but, it's just nice to see, different people in the family writing and, enjoying it like I do. And my wife doesn't write any of this kind of stuff, but she is an associate pastor, and she writes a lot of sermons. So writing, I guess, is in the family with all of us. And it's just something that I hope will just keep continuing to come to me, because a lot of this stuff doesn't just, you don't just think about what you're writing and then just start writing. It sort of comes to you sometimes. It depends on how you're feeling that day. And the first thing is, and the most important thing is, don't write from your head. Write from how you're feeling and what's in your heart, because that's really what all writers really do have, is that passion in them. It's not the thinking about it, it's the what you're feeling and how how, what's inside your soul, that makes you want to really write. At least that's the passion that I have. So if I'm having writer's block, then it's usually because something is preventing me from, having that energy that particular time. But don't give up, even if you just write a couple of sentences first thing in the morning or before you go to bed, just keep doing it. Don't go a day without writing something, even if it's just a little bit, just to keep that idea going, because you're going to wake up the next day, you're going to see it, and then you're going to oh yeah, now I remember where I was going with that. And then you can, or you can record it, on your phone or whatever, but just keep that flow going, because it's the flow that helps you keep. So sooner or later, that little trickle is going to become floodgates, and you're going to be coming up with all kinds of ideas and thoughts. So the more you do it, the easier it comes. It's important that you do write something a little bit each day, to keep the creative juices going. So I do that with a thing that I do every month. That it's a coffee house down in Lakeville that has an open mic night. So I share a lot of poems that I've written and a lot of short stories that I've written. And I've been doing it for probably about 7 or 8 years. So I got a binder this thick with all that stuff. It's just a great way to express yourself in a way that you can't do with any other kind of hobby. So I'm just very glad that I'm able to do it. And it's a good feeling to be able to see, the people that you love, the people that you care about, enjoying it too.
Medfield TV. Community shows.